Gourmet Guitars, the best luthiers DVD series. From guitar enthusiasts for guitar enthusiasts.
I started because of the influence of my older brother, Bart, who was playing guitar before me, and he had a late 50s Les Paul that was refinished, and he decided to refinish it as sunburst and put humbuckers in it when it was a gold top with P90s, but it was already refinished. And I said, why do you want it to be sunburst with humbuckers? And he said, this is so it will look like a 58 or 59 or 60. The kind of guitar played by Peter Green and so many of my other favorite guitar players. And I said, oh, and which other guitar players? And we quickly started talking about the Allman Brothers and Eric Clapton, and then Jimmy Page and Jeff Beck and Joe Walsh and so many other people that were using these guitars. And I go, oh, so this is supposed to be the best of the Les Pauls? Yes. So I got the craze. This would have been around 1971. 72, I start looking for an alternative that I could afford, which is still very common today. I could not afford a real burst, which would have cost me maybe $1,500. So I looked for a 1968 Les Paul with the gold already stripped off the top so that I could have it routed for humbuckers. I knew it would have a two-piece center seam top. I could put sunburst on it, and I would have the next best thing. This was in 1972. Somewhere shortly thereafter, maybe 1973, I'm with my brother and a good friend of ours, and we see Billy Gibbons drive by, and our friend is a good friend of Billy's, and Billy says, come over to the house, I'll show you some guitars. And so we go into Billy's house. This is his parents' home, not a private home at that time. I mean, it was not his separate house, it was his parents' house. And in the room he still had there, was filled with guitars. And he pulled out a burst. He did not have Pearly there. That was somewhere where they were rehearsing. But he had another burst with all the color had faded away. And he said, I call this the unburst. That was the first burst I ever held in my hands. And that was the first time I heard that term. First time I got to meet Billy Gibbons, and was pretty much, I was the youngest kid in the group, and I just kind of sat there and listened and was very happy that I got to hold that one burst. That was the first time I saw one. So in the early 70s, I got the craze. After shortly moving to Springfield, Missouri in 1975, a friend here in town told me that there was an old sunburst Les Paul at a local store, had just come in. And I hurried over there, and it was the 1960 that we showed earlier, the one I call Curly, and I purchased that one, 1975, for $2,000, and I was considered the craziest guitar player in town, or guitar man in town, for paying such a ridiculous amount of money for a used guitar. This Les Paul, this is the one that started it all for me. This was my first sunburst Les Paul. I bought this in 1975 right here in Springfield, Missouri at a store called the Rock Shop. This is a very late 1960 model. Unusual features for the 60 are the reflector tops on the knobs, which just were introduced. It's actually a rare variation on this knob. If you look through the knobs sideways, you can see all the way through them. Check out later knobs, they're not built that way. Other features about this is a very thin neck in the depth of the neck. They talk about these as having a thin neck, and some people think they're thin at the nut, but they're not. They're thin in the depth of the wood. This one has replaced keys, because the original keys, the buttons have shrunken, and so I just put good quality replacements on there. And covered with small straight stripes. You turn it different ways and they show up and disappear. And a bright cherry red that does not fade away like the cherry red in some of the 58 and 59 Les Pauls in the early 1960s. This is very late in the production of Les Pauls, very late in 1960. Curly. I named this one Curly. This was my first. For $2,000. Could buy a brand new one for less. It didn't make sense.
Gourmet Guitars, the Best Luthiers DVD series. From guitar enthusiasts for guitar enthusiasts.